So I actually forgot that before this anime pretty much started airing, I believe they announced it either before it aired or pretty much right after it started airing, that there was going to be a few recap episodes because of the production being 21 episodes. It had an uneven amount of numbers, also with the delay in terms of like when we got this new section of episodes after that little Christmas break there. They kind of structured it so it would more or less end at the end of the winter 2020 season. So I was expecting this episode last week, completely forgetting that there was a planned recap for a long time. I know some people were saying, oh, it's probably because they're struggling for production, but no, this was a planned thing from the very beginning, so it would have a healthy production and would end in a timely time frame in terms of its time slot, which it's airing on for TV. So last week, having a little recap, of course, is disappointing not be able to have more fake Grand Order, but I mean, the wait was worth it. This show, in terms of escalation, especially with its fight sequences, is unlike any other that I've seen in quite some time. I mean, just the dynamic camera angles and just how we were really getting up close and personal, it really felt like we were watching gods and goddesses just clash at the end of the world, and everything that was happening, we were both shocked and in awe, but also terrified about where it could go. The first half of this episode is some of the best content in Grand Order to date, in my honest opinion. I think Kingu's just kind of like shock of what is going on with him, like, okay, I was just created, but it doesn't matter because I am a child of my mother, right? Like, that's all he ever knew. And the only thing that ever gave him purpose was that he was the only child, and he was going to be kind of like the one to lead, right? He'd be the one to lead the new generation of humanity, and then you just get stabbed in the heart, and your heart is ripped away and swallowed by your sibling. Like, that is such a shocking moment. I mean, it ended up with that moment at the end of episode 15, but that was just a cliffhanger, right? We didn't really see what the purpose was. And to have these horrifying brats, just that voice acting is so ominous. It's so creepy. It's just, like, even when you don't understand what they're saying, it's so menacing. But when you actually get that subtitle where you really read into what they're saying, it's like, that is so demonic. And I think it's quite interesting to see someone who's been very mysterious. Like, okay, we're saying that this is Enkidu, but it's not Enkidu, it's clearly a fake because the real one's dead. And then we learn that the heart is basically the kind of key to all this, and how it kind of starts making sense on why there's memories that only the real version should have, but is basically being told that you're a copy and a fake and just a phony. And everything starts clicking more and more as we're progressing basically through a chase sequence of just a pretty horrifying chase sequence, I might add. A character who is almost wiping the floor with Gilgamesh is basically running for his life in a forest with these demonic beings chasing and laughing about how fun it is to try to kill him. And I have to say, I thought the Siduri content was over. I really, really did. But to see the closing moments and just how we start seeing them kill each other, we're like, okay, yeah, I mean, granted, they might be able to think for themselves, and then to see the moments where it was so beautiful and heartbreaking and gross all wrapped up into one. You're looking at such a demonic creature, but with such a pure soul. And something that I have to give major props to for the studio is something that a lot of anime, they don't do. Anime is typically hand-drawn, and in doing so, a lot of the things that I think really add a dynamic flair kind of get overlooked, but the idea of effects is something that Ufotable does a whole lot of. When you see like swords clashing or explosions, like there's a lot of dynamic visuals going on. And when she was crumbling, right, like just like the ashes and just how she was cracking and falling apart, that was so heartbreaking because of the level of realism in those simple details, really making it feel like someone was disintegrating before her eyes, and she deserved anything other than this fate. It was such a beautiful, touching, and just kind of eye-opening scene where we really start understanding what Kingu's purpose was all this time, and so many questions we had about his identity and who he was and why it almost felt like he was a fake but not a fake. It just immediately answers itself in this moment and gives such a horrible but perfect resolution to such a great character all in the process, and really setting the stage of who knows what Kingu's final role in this show will be. Will, Kingu be the one to put the final blow into the mother's heart? Like, there's a lot of things that could happen, or is it going to be more of like taking your heart back? I mean, this is a show where like a lot of characters can get bad fates, but even if Kingu gets a horrible one, I am glad to see that in at least this moment, this forest sequence, something at least optimistic happened in the sight of so much despair and distress, and I love that first half, I have to say. I mean, I think I can probably speak for a lot of anime originals. We were probably expecting someone like, our main character, Fujimaru, to pretty much come in and save the day in that forest sequence, but it was so much better because he wasn't the one to do it, and he had to progress because of his mission. And to see the second half where, I mean, it was only a matter of time, no one's gonna be shocked that Ushiwaka, came back. I mean, it was clear that she was still alive and being kind of tormented and manipulated and experimented on. But to see what they did to her, I actually was shocked that she looked as human as she did. I was expecting the new children of humanity or something like that. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise. On one hand, it's like, oh, thank God she doesn't look like a horrible monster, but she's being manipulated as one, is just copying herself nonstop. And it's both badass, but so disappointing to see one of the best characters of Grand Order suffer a fate like this, and how Fujimaru has to swallow his pride and realize he can't save everyone and we have to kill her. And it was quite interesting to see the escalation in this fight because, I mean, I totally was just buying in. It was going to be one version of her and then they just killed her. I was like, okay, that's a little disappointing. I mean, you're going to bring back after hurting us so much and then just kill her with one shot. But to see the kind of duplication, I was like, okay, I probably should have just been okay with the one version because now we're going to have to see our girl multiple times get killed. And I love that scene we have Ishtar and just our main character just kind of passing the energy to just do this massive explosion, which was both badass and depressing, which is something I have to give a lot of credit to Grand Order. They make scenes both feel badass but just soul crushing all in the process. Because you love a character and you hate seeing something like this happen, but at the same time it looks so gorgeous and is so well produced, you can't help but love it. And when you have the level of sound direction that this anime has with just, Ishtar's little handgun going off, it sounds so good with all the little details. And I'm always conflicted with how I feel with action pieces where I'm just like, okay, I don't have any connection to this demonic beast. Slap this bitch around, I'm fine with that. But then when it's a character I love, I'm like, it's really cool to see it, but it's also heartbreaking to see it. And I love that kind of constant playing with your emotions. It gives this extra level of anxiety that I think the show wants to have, and I think it's an important element to make the stakes of this end of the world feel goddamn exhilarating. There is no time to slow down. Literally stopping for 5 minutes lets Mother just suck the ocean up and just make it so everything goes to shit. Gilgamesh says in this episode they can defend an hour at best. That is not a lot of time to deal with the end of the world. It's basically like missiles are about to launch and they have an hour to stop them and disarm them as they're fighting an entire country trying to get to that deactivate button. To be able to mourn, to be able to slow down and kind of decompress would be really stupid because this is the end of the world. And for these characters, they must be feeling a level of anxiety and just depression and remorse and just every bits of negative emotions is in their body, but they're the only ones who can stop it. So to give that same feeling to the viewer by just speeding through things, you're just holy God, okay, we're seeing this, we got this, okay, we gotta immediately move to the next objective. There is no time to sit and mourn until we truly either defeat it or Fujimaru kind of gets sucked away and he has to just accept defeat. I love that about this kind of endgame, where rather than doing what a lot of series would do, where the end boss would be 3 to 4 episodes, we started this a couple weeks back and we still have 6 episodes left or 5 episodes left. So it's it feels like there is always a lot happening, but that's a good thing. I love reflecting on this series so much because those moments where characters were just sitting around talking and reflecting on those past events, it makes them even more impactful. I loved them at the time because it felt like, oh, this is showing that these characters have a deeper history than just this Babylonia story, so it makes them feel like more than just plot devices and things like that. But seeing what we're seeing now, especially since this is the first true anime in the Grand Order series that is more than just an OVA or something like that, it's a full-blown anime, it makes those scenes all the more impactful, especially when we get other anime in the Grand Order universe. When we get those moments where Fujimaru and the gang are going to be able to just sit around and talk, we are going to appreciate it because we'll remember moments like these where we're when that happens, when the end of the world is on your shoulders and you have to keep rushing to the finish line and letting people you care for be sacrificed for the greater good, it just makes those slice of life scenes all the more impactful. This show is just doing something that I think is incredibly impressive. Obviously, when you have a lot of time to flesh out your source material in terms of its anime adaptation, of course, it's gonna generally look pretty good, but it's looking way better than I think any game player was probably expecting. And I gotta thank the team 100 times over for how much quality they're delivering and how much I am so thankful that this was a healthy production. But in terms of the overall theme, the story, and the personal motivations, I love how connected I feel to them. Kingu is a character who, in a lot of ways, I was like, kill him. Honestly, like, kill him, even if he's been manipulated, just kill him. I mean, he's an obstacle. We can't really put our empathy towards someone who's caused so much turmoil, especially at the end of the world. But within 10 minutes, they made me just say, like, you know what? Give him a second chance. And that's something that could easily feel forgettable or cliche, but the fact that something that was basically created for one purpose gets betrayed in such a horrible way and then gets saved by such a pure soul. I love moments like that, and to see characters I have so much respect for turn into such a husk of their former selves. It is soul-crushing and depressing to see just how badass and horrifying this episode was. And I don't know how someone creates something that feels so demonic, such as these children, as a lot of times when you have like really demonic creatures, you try to make it as complex as possible to make it really feel like something from your deepest and darkest parts of your imagination. But more often than not, because of the medium, because of just the time and resources you have, you can't make it look all that horrifying, and it looks more goofy than anything. And a lot of times, for a lot of really good horror movies, what they do is they don't even show you the monster because your imagination can be more horrifying than anything that they can design. But the fact that they give it such a basic design, something that feels so laughable at first, right? You're just looking at a blob, but then it starts laughing, but then it starts talking, then you see the teeth and you see what they're capable of, and that is the perfect design for something that is supposed to invoke a nightmare feeling for us and these characters 1,000 times over. Grand Order is just fantastic, and the wait was well worth it for this episode, and I am dying to see where they're gonna go. And I know even when we defeat one obstacle, 1,000 more are gonna pop our way, and until episode 21 wraps up, we know things are just going to keep escalating. And when it feels like everything's going to be okay, it probably isn't going to be okay. Let me know your thoughts, though, down in the comment section below. Be it for source material players of the mobile game or anime originals like myself, let me know. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, peace, take care, and have a good one.